Today we're going through 8 Section Brocade in its entirety, and I hope to provide as much detail as I can. A magnificent set. It's practiced by almost everyone who does Qi Gong in China, and really has a lot of health benefits to this style on us. So the first movement, support the heavens. This one, you can almost do this one just sitting even. This is the main movement with the hand sitting on top of the head and the palm facing up towards the ceiling. And then a simple, not quite straightening and lowering action. So even this amount of work on this set is really going to benefit your shoulders, and of course all the meridians coming down through your arm, down through all this portion of the body. And of course when we do two arms, then the benefit multiplies. And that's really it. When we're in this position, the hands should be on top of the head and not forward of the body. And as much as possible, aiming the palms right to the ceiling. So this position, my elbow is a little bit forward of the body. And because of shoulder action, the shoulder actually rotates backwards as your arm comes down. So now the elbow should end up behind your body. That's a couple of things you can check for. Of course, if that's not happening easily for you, you don't want to force the issue. But what that means is, instead of forcing it, that what you want to do is pay more attention specifically to this area and see how released you can get with that. So the second part, if you want to do the entire thing, is that we're doing a little bit of a sink and a little bit of a rise coordinated with the arms going up and down. Now, in class, I have been talking about this recently, that when we sit, we compress the body. This is not bobbing up and down by any means, loosely in a disconnected manner. It should be very much as if every part of your body is actually being pulled down into the ground. It has to go through the hips, of course, to get this enabled. And still, quite a few people actually push the hip joint forward, assuming that if the knees are bent, the hips are bent, and it's often not the case. So when you're playing with this on your own, of course, you can just take this one posture. You don't have to do all 8 postures by any means. Then just touch yourself here. It's a line between belly and thigh. It's a diagonal line right here. It's actually the hip joint. Keep your hand there, feeling what's going on there. If it is loose, if you've gotten that far with this, then that's really good. You've made good progress. And if not, then again, instead of trying to force the issue or doing something that misaligns your body, just pay extra attention and practice what I'm doing right now. This is just very lightly moving up and down, just trying to see, am I doing it close to correct? So the other half of this is not just that we compress, but oddly enough, even standing, we're actually compressing it also. That is, we're releasing it down through the ground. So when we rise, for instance, this is a demonstration I've just been doing. If someone is pulling down on your shoulder and you have a power struggle when you attempt to come up, that simply means you're not releasing your body, you're not moving your body into the ground. And rooting, as with all other attributes, it's not just do it once and it's done. It's a continuous process. So when we're coming up, my chest is going to sink quite a bit, including this area, just leading into my shoulder. The shoulders themselves should actually feel as if pulled down, and the hands, you want them, if you're doing something like I'm doing right now, to open and almost reach, create a really nice stretch down through here. This is just terrific for you. If you can do this in a aligned manner, as if you're sliding down a wall, not pushing forward, not pushing back, then this is really, really good. You've made a lot of progress. So to coordinate this, an image that I often use is that you have something very heavy in your hands, and you can't suddenly just kind of collapse into that weight. You have to manage that weight. So everything has to move at the same time. My hips and my shoulders and my hands all releasing in a very coordinated manner. So in this position, my chest is actually open a little bit, mostly due to the shoulder going backwards. And this is correct. There's a little bit of opening here, but by no means do I have excess tension. So very, very relaxed. Simply going up and down, trying to be as natural as possible. Regulating our breath to help with the process. Many things to focus on. So best to practice these in a place and time where you won't have disturbances. So here, breath very soft and releasing the shoulders, release the hips, release, and they continue to do so even as I rise. So I understand it's a difficult concept to understand. And when we can film and have partners, I'll be very happy to answer any questions you have with a partner is the best way, because then you can see their reaction to how my body is moving quite differently than normal. So this is the full exercise that I'm doing now. And although I'm talking, my attention is very much inside the body, very focused on release, very focused on my breath, very focused on rooting the entire body, rooting, except of course, the three main things that don't root: the head, and this one is quite prominent in this exercise. The hands, in Qi Gong, sometimes we break this rule, but mostly the palms of the hands should be facing upwards. So in Tai Chi, again, that's more often you'll see this rule in place in Tai Chi, unless people are being without understanding this basic principle. So that's the first exercise. I'll do it 8 times. You're quite welcome to come and do it along with me. So it should go without saying that if we move quickly while we're doing these exercises, not only will our breath be more difficult to control, but we'll probably miss a lot of the adjustments that we may need to make while we're in motion. For instance, as my hand gets higher, my arm reaches up more, this area right here should sink more. And all of this area should be continuously going down. The hip should be releasing down the whole time. So whether we're physically sinking or rising, it really doesn't matter. This area has to continuously release downwards. And in the beginning, a lot of focus has to be put on that area to gain that attribute. the subtitle of this posture is Sanja, and what that refers to is triple burn, which is in this part of the body. It's mostly responsible for elimination and digestion. And you might wonder how this is affected by your arms going up and down and your hips sinking and rising. But if you can release enough, you're going to end up creating a line. This is the meridians that go directly down into Sanja and have quite a strong effect on digestion and elimination. And of course, this is dependent on us being able to release the body quite a bit as we're moving. As soon as you tighten, then usually what happens is the lines that we're interested in opening, they're doing quite the opposite. They're actually closing. So back a moment with posture 2 of Eight Section Brocade. 8 Section Brocade. Again, this is one that you can just do the arm movement and still get quite a bit out of it. You don't necessarily need to do the lower body movement. Of course, that enhances it, but you could be seated and doing this, and you'll get most of the benefit that we're after. So here's one of the things that we want you to do, and this breaks a few rules. Usually, in Tai Chi at least, and most of the time in Qi Gong, we have what we call a set wrist. And that is that the wrist doesn't bend in any manner. It's straight so that we can create lines all the way down to the forearm and through the entire length of the arm. When we do this creates a little bit of extra tension in here. The reason that we're doing it today in this particular posture is that we want to go into the hand and really stretch open. We're really emphasizing some meridian points. And the main one being here, close to the base of the thumb. So in this position, our fingers should point straight up. We should have an almost exact L figure here. And when we move into our position, we're actually going to be pressing. I've got a wall here today, so I can actually do this as if you're pressing your palm into a wall, but the wall, of course, is over here. So again, done as released as possible with the shoulder down and the elbow down. We're still going to get some really, really terrific work going on through that part of the hand and arm and down into the organs that affects. So one of the main difficulties is that when people do this, they often block their arm and are not really aware of it. When the arm locks, typically the shoulder is up out of place, and again, that's preventing the meridians that we're after opening, and instead it's disrupting the flow. So the proper positioning is that the elbow should be as if it's resting heavily on something. You can put your own arm under it, if you're just fooling around with it, and get a sense of, can you push that arm forward and keep your elbow very heavy? It's a very helpful one, usually for students to think about or actually to do. So that's the main arm, the lead arm, pressing out in that manner, very well bent, with accompanying bends in the hip. From elbow to inside the armpit and down into the hip, there should be one continuous circle or curve in that area with the arm actually sitting down into that area too. This is where your arm roots to in this position, is down in the hip and thigh area. So that's the main arm pushing forward. The other arm is pulling back. In this posture, you can see why it's called bend bow. So it's as if we're holding a bow and then drawing back on the string. And if you watch archers do this, you'll notice that they never do this, and some students do because we have all this excess tension we're trying to deal with in the body. But in fact, if you actually saw an archer do this, they wouldn't be here, they'd be in the back where the true strength of the body is. So when we do this, there's a large buffer here. My chest is a little bit sunk so that I can actually enable rounding of the back and a connection of the arms through the back. So that's the correct position with this arm drawing back, but not wrapping around the body. That's it's also going to break alignment. This arm has to go straight this way, creating a straight line to the other hand like that. So we're pushing, we're pulling, we're sitting, slightly rotated in that manner, and hold that for a breath or two, and then off to the other side. So what I'm doing right now is not the complete posture, but it's certainly sufficient to get a lot out of this. My weight is slightly more on this side, and I'm rotated slightly to that side. I stand up just a little bit, and then sit down again. And I want to make a point reminding you we don't need to sit very deeply in any of these postures or in Tai Chi either. Of course, it's better for you if you can, but it's not required. So head up and neck up and tail down, align down the spine. And again, regulated breathing, slow enough that you can think about the choreography. You can feel through your body to feel where you may be holding excess tension, and also slow and calm enough that you can concentrate on, is my breath released and down in the belly area, or at least can I let go of my belly as I'm doing these. This is a big milestone for a lot of people, is can I release my belly, never mind breath at this point, but can I keep my belly open as I go through these movements? It's a major milestone, and certainly we're spending some time. So we're getting close to correct on these postures, and as I said, this is certainly sufficient. But the way that they're actually done is in the transition, we have a step, and then the body rotates a little bit more onto the forward hip this way. So it looks closer to an actual Tai Chi stance, and gives us quite a bit more exercise. So there's a weight change, step, and with the next weight change, we coordinate the arm movements. Okay, pause and breathe and work through stretching the hand, work through dropping your elbow, creating stretch through here, another stretch here, and all of this connecting through the back. A weight change, step, and with the weight change, the arms coordinate. Let's just do 3 together. Posture 3 of 8 Section Brocade, regulating the spleen and stomach. We're going to be working on those meridians. This is also a very balancing posture where they reach up and they reach down. The pressure that they create should be exactly even, and not only even, but distributed through your entire body. So we don't want to lean or be out of alignment at any point. As the hand goes up and we push, raise, or feel ourselves pull, whatever image works for you, we need to release all through this area, So this pressure distributes itself through the body, and same with this one. This, if you tighten, all of your pressure is going to be contained, and the tightening is going to be contained in your arm. Very big misalignment, and stopping Qi flow rather than aiding Qi flow. So elbow again points down, palm points down, and here palm points up. This side of your chest, if you can touch, as you push down, you should feel that the pectoral muscle is actually tightening very slightly. It's released, but in use. On this side, if you touch here, what you should feel is the exact opposite, that this area of your body has gone downwards and backwards. And that's as it should be. It's kind of a unique phenomenon, but that's the way it goes. So this is one of my very favorite movements. Hands cross, basically a solar plexus, like a very slight rotation. And as the arms go up, I rotate back. So here we try our best not to raise anything except, of course, the arm, but the shoulder should not go up, the breath should not go up, and we don't really want to stand up. Again, it's this phenomenon of that we have an external rise, small as it may be, but we have internally a sink going on, and that covers 99.9% of the body. So final position is here. My right arm is going to be the high arm, so now I'm rotating very slightly to my left. And then roughly almost exactly 50 weight in this position. If you pause for a moment and focus on your breath and focus on release, you should find that your arms move another several inches, and that movement is going to be inside shoulder joint and through this area on this side. Of course, when you're doing these, you can prolong the movement or even pause. It's actually advised that you attempt at times to pause as you're moving through and feel where you release the entire time you're moving. Pausing and highlighting one portion will really help with that. So for instance, if you're here and you find your elbows up, you now have a chance to correct yourself. Posture 3, of 8 section. Posture 4. Posture 4 of 8 section brocade. And in this one, it's called healing the 5 illnesses and 7 injuries. And it's quite a simple looking posture to do. We're simply going to rotate and look backwards towards, if I'm turning left, I'm going to look over my shoulder toward my right heel. But there's quite a bit to it actually. And again, it's one that we need to slow down a little bit just got to feel our way through. So one of the easier methods of doing it is to just turn your head and fully release the body, dropping your shoulders, just releasing your hips, and going back and forth. A very calm, mindful manner. And we should find there's a lot of release points if you go slow enough, a lot of release points that you haven't realized you're holding. So the more advanced method, we start to turn on the hip, right into this area, not turning the torso, but actually turning the hip and not turning the torso. So we begin here, that's our first rotation, and then we do turn the chest, shoulders move a little bit, neck goes, head goes, and eyes go. We pause, release into it, and then let the pressure of being in that position just rotate us back so that we're facing forward again. So as many times as possible, you want to go through the alignment process of head up and neck up, and chin tucked, tongue rolled back, and hips open, tailbone as if pulled, and for the most part, and especially in this movement, the chest is released slightly inwards and feel not tense versus very tense and then locking into the lower body. You can hold that position for 1 breath or 2 breaths, as long as you want, and of course, longer the better, slower the better. So 2 main ways of doing this. One is that when I rotate, I sink my weight onto the side I'm rotating away from. For instance, my body is rotating to my left right now, so my weight's going to my right side. Almost feels as if I'm pulled back into my beginning position here. And the next rotation, if you bend and allow your weight to sink onto that hip, again it feels almost as if you're being pulled into the rotation. A little bit of pressure created to distribute through the body, and then release that pressure. Again, sitting, being pulled down into my hip, rotating into the hip, not locking this way. It should be quite loose, and there should be, say, 40% of your weight or 30% of your weight on the hip. The second method of doing this is that the side we're turning towards, we actually add slightly more weight on that side. This leg again is not going to straighten, locking and displaying tension and pushing us out of alignment. As we sit onto the side, we're going to have to bend this knee and hip, the side we're moving away from, just a little bit more, and it should still feel pressurized. this, and this sitting on this side, people can also work on another aspect of bending the body, aligning the body, and that aspect is that this side that we put more weight onto, when I bend this hip, it should cause the knee to rotate inward. So if you watch on the next movement, you see that my leg and my knee start off pointing exactly forward. And by the time I'm done, pointing off on 45 degrees, that's due to bending the hip joint, releasing to the hip joint. This makes sure there's no pressure on my knee, or very little. My weight is on the heel of this foot. I can touch and ensure that my hip is actually released. So my muscles are in use, and this confuses people sometimes because they say my thighs are screaming. How can this be good for my knee and help me heal a knee injury? Well, these muscles are in use and they're not used to being used that way. That's why you're lacking that strength to do this without feeling a lot of effort. What is going to hurt your knee is if you constantly misalign and put weight out onto your knee. That's a knee joint that's out of alignment and has a lot of pressure on it. Of course, it's going to wear down any joint that you do that to. When you do it correctly, there is more muscular effort involved in holding this position, but that's just conditioning. That just means do it until you don't feel disturbed by the use of the muscles. But by doing that, you've taken all the pressure off the knee and are actually building up everything around that knee joint. So that's what's going to help heal it. Plus you're releasing blood and qi into that area. Let's just do a couple more, and if you want, you can watch to see what my knee is doing as I move. That's it for looking backward, your 5 illnesses.